Born in 1943, Sharon Tate was an American model and actress. Sharon's life was tragically cut short in August of 1969 when she became a victim of the infamous Manson family murders. She was 8 months pregnant at the time. Sharon was an up-and-comer on the Hollywood scene, and at the age of just 26, was tragically taken far too soon.
I feel, at least in my estimation, that every person, if they want to be an actress, if they want to stay in the acting world, which is a pretty tough world, before you even make an appearance, it's very necessary to learn your craft first.
Sharon Marie Tate was born on January the 24th, 1943 in Dallas, Texas.
Sharon, you're a Texas girl, aren't you?
Yes, I was born in Dallas.
How much time did you spend there?
No time at all. I went from there to Washington State and then to Italy.
But we can still claim you in Texas.
Sure.
She was the eldest of 3 daughters and was born to U.S. Army Intelligence Officer Colonel Paul Tate and his wife Doris. With her father being in the Army, the family would move around quite a bit. And by the age of 16, she had lived in 6 different cities, so she found it hard to maintain friendships. Her family would describe her as shy and lacking in self-confidence. As she grew older and matured, she began entering beauty pageants. In 1959, at the age of 16, she won Miss Richland in Washington, and was wanting to compete the following year for Miss Washington in 1960. However, that would not transpire as her father was once again relocated. This time, the family had to move to Italy. However, while there, she was able to obtain parts as extras in films. And in 1960, with the film Barabbas being filmed in Verona, Italy, she was able to get her first, albeit very brief, time on screen in a feature film. And we're going to take this time now to look at Sharon Tate's complete filmography. Sharon had several bit parts in movies and TV shows such as The Beverly Hillbillies and Mr. Ed, before she made her first starring role in 1966 in Eye of the Devil. This helped propel Sharon's career, and she went on to star in such movies as The Fearless Vampire Killers with her husband and director Roman Polanski, Don't Make Waves, Valley of the Dolls, The Wrecking Crew, and her final movie, The 13 Cheers. Although the end for Sharon Tate was very sad and tragic indeed, she did leave her mark on the entertainment world. So let's go and check it out, the Sharon Tate filmography. So there it is, Sharon Tate's complete filmography in television and in movies. As you can see, even by the age of just 26, she had built up quite a comprehensive body of work. One can only imagine what she could have added to this had she had lived.
They didn't put you in front of a camera at all?
Well, they did, actually. My producer had a show called the Beverly Hillbillies, and they would slap a black wig on my head, and I would run out in front of the camera, just to get used to it. Because being in front of the camera and going to classes are two different worlds, entirely.
And why did they put the black wig on you? So that people wouldn't recognize you?
Me, right.
Before Sharon Tate went on to begin her career in Hollywood, she was given bit parts to play in various TV shows, and one of those TV shows was the Beverly Hillbillies, where she played receptionist Janet Trago, and this is where her and Max Baer, who played Jethro Bodine on the show, met.
Howdy.
Well, howdy to you. You're Jethro, aren't you?
Yes, ma'am.
In 1993, on a Jerry Springer special, there was a Beverly Hillbillies reunion, and Max Baer talked briefly about the time he dated Sharon Tate.
Do you all know who Sharon Tate was? Yes. Okay. Yeah, I took Sharon out a couple of times. What happened is that Sharon was doing a pilot called Petticoat Junction, and she wasn't in it, but she ended up playing Janet Trago, which was Jane Hathaway's secretary on the show, her assistant, and I took her out a couple of times. She was really a terrific girl, though.
As thinking of her as just sexy, I would stop and I would think, well, how is she mentally, and what moves this into that? And therefore, I don't really think of the characters as being a sex symbol or sex goddess or whatever you would like to call it.
She lives in a bungalow, she kills me with rose garden thorns, she waits for me. January 20th, 1968, Sharon gets married to Roman Polanski, and she began living a glamorous lifestyle with her new husband. And it was at this time that Charles Manson was trying to break into that same world with his music. Manson wanted a recording contract, and one man who he was trying to obtain this from was Terry Melcher. Melcher owned a house on Cielo Drive at the time, and this would prove pivotal in the ultimate fate of Sharon Tate and her friends on that tragic night in August of 1969. Manson and his followers had been to Melcher's house on Cielo Drive several times for parties, so they knew the layout of the house very well. In fact, on one particular day when Sharon was doing a photo shoot at the house on Cielo Drive, she actually crossed paths with Manson. Manson was looking for Melcher that day. He was told, no, he's not here, leave the premises. And indeed, Manson and Tate at least exchanged a glance with one another that day. It seemed some promises were made to Manson by Melcher about his music, but nothing ever came of it. And this seemed to be Manson's motives for the murders. So in December of 1968, Terry Melcher and his partner, Candace Bergen, moved out of the house. And so the following month, in January of 1969, it was Dean Morehouse who was living at Cielo Drive, and Tex Watson even frequented the house several times in January when he was visiting his friend Morehouse. The next month, in February of '69, the house was vacated, and this is where Sharon and Roman would move in. Sharon called it her dream house, her love house. Sharon would travel to Italy in March to work on her final ever film, 13 Chairs, and by the end of filming, she was now very pregnant. And it was advised by her husband, Roman, and the movie's director to stay in Italy and have her baby there, but she wanted to go back to the States to have it. And so she did. She traveled back on a ship. It was very uncomfortable, took many hours, but she did it. So she was back in the States by July of 1969, very pregnant, as we say. Her and members of her family watched the moon landing. Roman wasn't back yet as he was still overseas working. She was spending time at the house with her former partner and famous hairstylist to the stars, Jay Sebring, and her two other friends, Abigail Folger and Wojtek Frykowski. So by all intents and purposes at this point, things seemed to be going okay. But in reality, things would be anything but okay. It was just a few weeks after returning back from overseas, filming her final film, in the early morning hours of August the 9th, 1969, where horror and tragedy struck. The story goes that Charles Manson had asked several of his followers to go to that house at 10,050 Cielo Drive and to take the lives of everybody in there. The reasons it was thought that Manson said this was because he wanted to get back at Terry Melcher for not responding to him about the recording contract. It is thought that Manson didn't know 100% for sure if Terry Melcher was still living in the house. He had been back to the house in March, that was that day when he met Sharon, and he was told that Terry wasn't there anymore. So he definitely didn't know for sure if Melcher was still there, probably assumed that he wasn't. So it was assumed that Manson had no idea who was living at the house at the time. But he was just so mad at Melcher, he wanted everybody in that house gone. So Sharon's three friends, Sebring, Folger, and Frykowski, along with a young man, Stephen Parent, who was there visiting a friend of his in the guest house, which was out the back of the main house, all lost their lives that night. And Sharon lost her life that night as well. 8.5 months pregnant, just 26 years old. It was brutal, it was tragic, it was senseless, didn't need to happen, shouldn't have happened. But sadly, in those very early morning hours of August the 9th, 1969, members of the Manson family broke into the house and took the lives of 5 innocent people and the unborn son of Sharon Tate.
All of you know how beautiful she was. And very often I read and heard statements that she was one of the most beautiful, if not the most beautiful woman of the world. But only few of you know how good she was.
She lives by the wall and waits by the door. She walks in the sun to me. She lives by the wall and waits by the door. She walks in the sun to me.
There is a story, and it's a true story, of Sharon having somewhat a premonition of her own death. She told Fate magazine in 1968 that a year prior she had had a terrible dream, a terrible nightmare. Back in the 1930s, Hollywood director Paul Byrne, who was married to Jean Harlow at the time, had died under suspicious circumstances in his house. Now, over 30 years later, Jay Sebring, who was in a relationship with Sharon Tate, bought that house. So Sharon was staying over one night. She was there by herself and said she couldn't sleep, and said she had a funny feeling. In her own words, "I saw this creepy little man. He looked like all the descriptions I had ever read of Paul Byrne." According to Tate, the figure entered the bedroom and dashed around the room, frightening her so much that she jumped up and ran towards the stairs in her bathrobe. But once she reached the staircase, the dream only got worse. Tate continues, "I saw something or someone tied to the staircase, whoever it was, and I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, but knew somehow that it was either Jay Sebring or me. He or she was cut open at the throat." So a very disturbing experience that she had at that house, and some believe that it is a dream that indeed foreshadowed her own death, so pretty creepy stuff.
What would you ultimately like to achieve as an actress?
Well, at this moment, I really couldn't say, but I want to remain as much myself as possible, you know, and just do what I feel like doing and what really excites me and interests me.
Sharon's funeral was held a few days after her passing at the Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City, California, with Jay Sebring's funeral being held later that same day as well. Just 2 months later, in October, Charles Manson and his followers were arrested. They were charged for their crimes and all given life sentences, with Charles Manson dying in prison in 2017 at the age of 83. As I say, a senseless act, something that did not need to happen, a random act of violence, and on that night, Sharon Tate and her friends were the unfortunate victims of just simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Tate is buried at the Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City, California, with her unborn son Paul, her mother Doris, and her sister Patty. Rest in peace to all who passed away on that night.
If I fall far away, would you still hear sounds I made? And if I fall, I won't run away, but not too hide and don't go away too soon. If my heart's prepared to lose, but I choose you don't mind. Not gonna lie. Oh, everything changes. Everything changes. Oh, everything changes. Oh.